Caldera is here, and I have the best settings for you guys for the new map. This is how you can expect the game to look before and after applying these settings, and as you can see, I'm getting about 50 more FPS. Now, none of the Windows settings or the NVIDIA control panel settings are any different from the last video, but if you're new here and you haven't seen one of my settings video, I'll link that last video down in the description. Make sure you get all those Windows settings and NVIDIA control panel settings copied, and then come back to this video for the updated graphics settings. And if you're using an NVIDIA graphics card, make sure you guys are using the 472.12 driver. It is the best driver for Warzone. If you don't know how to see what driver you're on, just right click your desktop, go to your NVIDIA control panel, and then once that loads up in the top here, you're going to see it says help. Just go there and then click on system information. And the very first thing you see here under details is what driver version you're on. So you're going to want to make sure this is 472.12. But this video is actually sponsored by Sense Quality. If you don't know who Sense Quality is by now, they're a company that specializes in optimizing and overclocking PCs. This clip you're seeing right here on screen is from Cornel, who is the owner of Sense Quality, and he's actually managed to hit 300 plus FPS in Caldera, which is obviously with the best of the best parts that you can get for Warzone, but nonetheless, it's insane. They've optimized the PCs for half of the CDL, as well as a lot of the top streamers you guys know, which are popping up on screen here, as well as my PC, which just goes to show the quality of work they do. Everything they do is done remotely. You don't need to send them your PC or anything crazy. And if you guys are interested in any of their services, you can use code WebzyBusiness for 20% off anything on their website. That is sensequality.com. I will have them linked down in the description. Make sure you guys check them out. Now that we're in the game here, just go to your options down in the bottom left and then to the graphics tab. And we now have two different options under the graphics tab: display and quality. We're going to be starting under display here with display mode in full screen. Full screen will give the best FPS and the least amount of input lag, which is what we want. Double check here under screen refresh rate that your correct refresh rate is selected for your monitor. Render resolution, for the majority of us, we do want this at 100. Now, if you play on 1080p and you got a 3080 or a 3090 and maybe even a 3070, try bumping this up to 121 and see if you lose any FPS, because the game is going to look significantly clearer if you do that. And on those graphics cards I mentioned, you shouldn't lose any FPS. For dynamic resolution, I do have this disabled. Now, if you're on a super low end PC and you're not getting the kind of frames you like, you could enable this and then put the dynamic resolution frame rate target to whatever the refresh rate of your monitor is. For instance, if you have a 144 hertz monitor, set this to 144, but keep in mind, doing this is going to make the game lower the resolution automatically in order to help you hit that target frame rate. So the game's not going to look as good. If you're playing on 1080p, it might drop the quality down to like 720p to try hitting that target frame rate. So just keep that in mind. I don't generally recommend it, but it could help some of you out there. VSync, we want this disabled. VSync will lock your FPS to the refresh rate of your monitor, and it will add a little bit of input lag, which we don't want. Custom frame rate limit, I just set this to unlimited. If your game isn't feeling as smooth, you could set this to custom and then click advanced and then put this gameplay custom frame rate limit to whatever the refresh rate of your monitor is. Your brightness, a lot of people get the brightness wrong. I see a lot of people just crank this all the way up and their game looks super washed out and gross, and I do not recommend that. That is just going to make visibility worse. Literally just do what it tells you to do here. This barely visible thing in the middle, just make sure the MW logo is barely visible, and that's going to give you the best visibility. It's that easy. NVIDIA highlights, we do want this disabled. Otherwise, it's just always going to be recording stupid little clips that we don't want. And then NVIDIA reflex low latency. I used to recommend putting this on enabled. Changing this from enabled to enabled plus boost actually boosted my frame rate by about 5 to 10 FPS. So we do want this on enabled plus boost now. Moving on over to the quality tab. Now, field of view, you know, generally it's preference. I like to have this maxed out so I can see more around me. And visually, you get a lot less recoil the higher you go with your FOV. So you want to go to advanced under field of view and just double check that this is selected to affected. Setting this to independent is going to make it so when you ADS, you're going to be ADSing to the default FOV, which is 80, and that visual recoil is going to be horrible. It's going to look like you are playing on a console. So keep this on affected and you're going to be hitting a lot more shots. Now, this is a new setting here, camera movement. I like that they added this. By default, they have have this all the way up to 100%, which we don't want. We want to turn this down as low as possible. That means our camera is going to be shaking a lot less when there's grenades and airstrikes and all that stuff going off. Just making the game easier on the eyes and making visibility a little bit better. Streaming quality, we do have on normal. Texture resolution, I was testing this out and the difference between low and very low was literally 1 FPS for me. So rather than have the game look like complete crap, I would rather lose that 1 FPS and make it look a little bit better. Putting it up to anything higher than low is where I started to actually lose a noticeable amount of FPS. Texture filter anisotropic, we do have this on high. There was literally no difference between the low and high setting when it came to FPS. Particle quality, again, we are leaving this on high. Particle quality actually boosts your FPS, which is weird. I still don't understand it. Bullet impacts and sprays, I do have this disabled. This can be very CPU intensive, but you know, if you want to see the little heart you spray on the ground when you're being toxic after you kill someone or whatever, you know, you can enable it. Tessellation, we want this disabled as well. This is another new setting. Dismemberment and gore effects, which I am leaving enabled. I haven't noticed it has any effect on FPS yet. On-demand texture streaming, we want disabled. Enabling this will allow the game to download high quality textures to your computer while you're playing the game, which could cause lag, and we don't want that. And the highest setting here only works if you have your texture resolution on high anyway, which we don't want. Then we have filmic strength here, which is going to depend on the anti-aliasing setting you guys choose, and we'll go over that in a second here. Film grain, we just want this completely turned down. I don't think this affects anything in the game, it's just in the menus, but it does look gross. DLSS now is interesting. I did notice that putting this on the quality option did boost my frames by about 20, and honestly, I would not recommend using DLSS on any other setting. But when I turned DLSS on, I noticed there was a lot of like flashing and flickering in the textures on the map. This is something you're gonna have to try out for yourself. Have DLSS off, go into a game, see what your FPS is like, and then turn this to quality and then compare your FPS. And then also see if you're getting that flickering effect in the textures like I was. If you're not getting that effect, using DLSS will significantly boost your frames. Anti-aliasing. Now, here's the thing with anti-aliasing. The game just, it doesn't look very good with anti-aliasing off. I'm just gonna be straight up. The game looks the best with SMAA T2X. The problem is when I put it up to the setting, I lose 20 FPS compared to having it off. So anti-aliasing is gonna depend on how you want your game to look. If you just want more frames and don't really care how your game is looking, turn it off. If you want your game to look really good and you don't mind losing about 10 to 20 frames, then turn it up to the T2X option. The difference between the 1X and having it completely off, the game doesn't really look any different, so I wouldn't recommend that option. And then the highest option, it just looks too blurry and I can't really recommend using that at all. So if you do decide to turn your anti-aliasing off, make sure you have your filmic strength all the way up. And if you do that T2X option, you're going to want to turn your filmic strength all the way down. Now, depth of field, world motion blur, and weapon motion blur, we want all these disabled. That is just going to affect our visibility. Shadow map resolution. Now, I noticed a lot of comments in the last settings video saying that setting shadow map resolution to high actually improved your FPS, and I just don't believe it because I set my shadow map resolution to high and I tested it, and then I set it to low and I tested it, and I was getting about 5 more FPS with the setting on low, and the shadows just, I mean, they don't even look any different. So I would recommend setting this to low, but I guess you could test it out for yourself. Both the cache spot shadows and the cache sun shadows, we want both of these enabled as always. Particle lighting, we want this on low. DirectX ray tracing. Now, this is another thing I saw a lot of people talking about in the comments. They say that ray tracing doesn't do anything in Warzone, but I went and I enabled it and I lost 30 FPS. Then I disabled it and I got those 30 FPS back. So it does do something. Be careful when you're reading the comments. And then ambient occlusion, I have this disabled, and then screen space reflections is also disabled. And that is that for our settings. If you want my audio settings, I am playing on boost high, but different audio mixes will sound better and different on different types of headsets, so keep that in mind. I have tested all the different audio settings before, and I know that boost high and boost low will give the loudest footstep sound, so whichever one of those sounds the best to you, I would recommend using that setting. If this video did help you out, make sure you click that subscribe button and subscribe if you're new here. I'd really appreciate that, and I'll keep you guys updated on the Warzone settings if I do find anything new that does need to be changed. But I hope you guys did enjoy the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Here's the web. Peace.